What's up, BBN? Welcome back to the Kentucky Connection Pod. I promised I would be doing these more often, and I did not hold up to that promise, but we're going to try to get back into it. I had a bunch of people on the Discord asking me about it and ask when the next episode was. So I had to get another fire guest on for this one. We got Jim Arrange coming back. He was on it a few months ago. We covered the college basketball landscape before the season started, kind of predicted how things were going to go. I feel like for both of us, we didn't really see it coming this year, just how wild college basketball has been this year. The parity is insane. It seems like everyone is either good or everyone is bad. Like I still haven't figured out, what's going on, but it's good to have you back on here, man.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I'm glad that I can still catch an invite now that you're a big shot now.
Oh my God. Oh, man. You're still bigger than me, man. Still bigger than me. You just
congrats on 10K. Congrats.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely a great feeling. I've been moving towards it slowly but surely, and it's kind of taken off over the last couple months. So, I'm definitely happy about that. And I personally owe a lot of that to you, bro. Like I said last time we were here, I was watching your content before I even started doing this. It kind of helped inspire me in to do the things that I started doing. So, big ups for that. And, I appreciate the support. Definitely been along for the ride. But today we're going to kind of just talk a little bit about the college basketball landscape, kind of touch on just how wild it's been. And then we'll get into Kentucky as a team and kind of, your thoughts on the team and my thoughts on the team, and just kind of how it's been a weird year for Kentucky as well, just like I think it has been for most teams. And then we're going to give both of our top 5 teams in the country, not necessarily what the rankings are right now, because obviously there's a top 5 right now, but just who we think the 5 best teams in the country are at this stage. We're getting into this fourth quarter of the season. So, definitely I think we've seen enough to kind of tell who we think the best teams are. So starting off, what do you think about college basketball this year, man? I mean, we've seen number 1 teams losing, number 2 teams losing, all these top 5 teams losing. You got random teams coming in and out of the top 25. I think Charleston's like 15th right now or something, unless they lost recently. I don't know. But, what do you think about college basketball as a whole and just how crazy it's been this year?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it does seem like nobody's good. Like that's kind of something that I see from week to week, like people saying, well, nobody's like elite this year. I do think across the board parity is way up in college basketball, and whether you want to say that that's a result of increased NIL opportunities or the transfer portal and talent being more widely dispersed throughout the country, whatever it is, really good mid-majors this year. Some of the traditional powerhouses are down a little bit, so it should make for a lot of fun when we hit March and conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament. So,
right. Well, and when it comes to the transfer portal, as much as it hurt Kentucky this year with, losing a guy like Bryce Hopkins, if a guy leaves Kentucky to go be the number 1 guy at a place like Providence, that right there is enough to make them a top 25 team and a team who, is playing really well this season. So I do think that is a good part of the transfer portal, where you've got guys, he just wasn't happy at Kentucky, wasn't getting it done at Kentucky, and he wanted to go somewhere else. And now he's got Providence as a surefire tournament team where, if they didn't land him, they probably still would have been decent, but he's their best player. So I think that is where the transfer portal is a good thing for the landscape as a whole, because you're going to have guys, you're still going to have, like, Kentucky next year is landing 6 5-stars in their recruiting class, but there is a world where maybe 1 or 2 of those guys doesn't work out at Kentucky and goes somewhere else and changes the trajectory of another program. So I definitely agree with that. And like I said, it's like I can't tell if everyone is good or if everyone's bad, because I mean, you had top 3 Tennessee yesterday lose to Florida like decisively. Like it was not a good game from Tennessee. And then Alabama, who I was saying was the number 1 team in the country, got beat by 30 by a bad Oklahoma team the other day. And so it's just wild to see, Kentucky lost to South Carolina earlier in the year, and Kentucky's just been struggling in general. You had Gonzaga lose to Loyola Marymount at home. And it's just like, what is going on? It's like, I've never seen it on this level before, at least not in recent memory, where there is no best team.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, I think, with the transfer portal, I think a big thing with that is the way it worked before was like a guy could see that there was probably a better opportunity somewhere else, but he's like, I don't really want to have to transfer and sit out a year.
Right.
Like I'd rather just kind of stick it out where I am because I'm comfortable here. But now it's like I can go somewhere else where I think there's a better opportunity, where I think I can get more touches and I can play right away. And so we're seeing guys do that. We're seeing guys like Bryce Hopkins do that. And it's really worked out for them. And looks like Providence is doing all right now. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned some of these big time teams losing. Like Gonzaga broke a 20-something year streak of winning at home. Like they do not lose in the kennel. So it's crazy to see them lose. Tennessee, we can talk about Tennessee for a second because Tennessee, their highs are so high. Like they at their best are absolutely a Elite Eight, Final Four contender. Like they are that good. Their defense is insane. Like argument for best in the country. The question with Tennessee though is always like, can they score enough? Like when is the shoe going to drop and they're suddenly going to shoot 30% from the field and lose to some 13 seed from the Summit League?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And they kind of remind me of Kentucky last year. I mean, like in maybe not in play style, but just like Kentucky's highs last year were crazy. Beat Kansas at Fog Allen by 20. We beat UNC by 30. We beat Tennessee at home by 30. And then, we had other games where we just got destroyed and just didn't play well. And then obviously lost to St. Peter's in the tournament. So Tennessee kind of reminds me of last year's Kentucky team where it's like, they're good. They're legit. They'll be a top 3 seed in the tournament, but it's like if they have one off game in the tourney, it could be over for them, which, would be the case for anybody, but they're more prone to that, I think. And yeah, Kentucky's got Florida on Saturday. That's our next game. And now for us, that's turned into, hey, this could be a good win for us. So, I mean, Kentucky right now is 1-7 in quad 1 games. So that's not good when it comes to the March Madness outlook. And so I'll use that to kind of move into talking about this Kentucky team a little bit. I mean, I remember in our podcast we did in the preseason, I was talking us up. I'm like, yeah, everybody, this team is built to win. And I think this is going to be a better team than last year. Obviously that hasn't been the case, but, kind of playing better lately. Dropped one the other day, but overall, that was against a Kansas team who had their back against the wall and they absolutely had to win that game. And, we still could have won it. So what do you think about Kentucky? What do you think they need to work on, and what do you think their outlook is for March?
Yeah, so Kentucky, the thing with Kentucky is that everything will always be framed by the preseason expectation of we're coming off the loss to St. Peter's, we're bringing back the National Player of the Year. On paper, this team looks like it's built to win. Like we have the National Player of the Year, we have Oscar, we know he's going to put up numbers. We're bringing in guys who can shoot theoretically. We have Severe Wheeler back, we have some of these guys back, and top 5 team in the country, sure. Right. And then they haven't been a top 5 team in the country. So I think some of the ways that people have talked about Kentucky are maybe a little over dramatic because I don't think they've been bad, right? It's just a question of where you thought they would be at the beginning of the season, because they only have, if you go through their results, the only real bad loss is the South Carolina loss. And that's really bad. But then they also only have one really good win too. Against Tennessee, and then the rest of it is kind of just all right, wherever.
I would say as of right now, our second best win of the season was probably Texas A&M, which they're not a ranked team. They're not. I don't think they were a quad 1. They can have been because we're only 1-7 in quad 1, so they weren't even quad 1 when we beat them. So that is looking like our second best win of the season, which. It's just been such a weird year because we're losing to all the good teams, but we're beating all the we haven't been upset except by South Carolina. So it's just we're just in this weird limbo where it's are we good? I don't know. I can't tell. And then, preseason expectations, we thought CJ Frederick was going to be one of the best shooters in the country. He was at Iowa for 3 years. He's shooting 32% from 3. He's shooting 24% in quad 1 games from 3. That right there is okay, nobody saw that coming. Nobody saw Oscar taking a massive step back defensively. He has genuinely become a defensive liability on this team. He gets cooked every game. They have figured out that he can't defend the pick and roll. He gave up 20 points to Kansas just through the pick and roll. It was crazy. So I feel like teams have figured out how to exploit our weaknesses. Severe Wheeler now has been relegated to the bench because we just play better without him in the lineup. And it's just all the, like you said, the preseason expectations for these guys. I don't think anybody on this team has lived up to what we thought they were going to be. I've been really impressed with Antonio Reeves lately. He has taken over as our best scorer, and he's been consistently good throughout all of conference play. But outside of Reeves, I don't think a single solitary player on this team has lived up to the preseason expectations. Maybe Case and Wallace, but even he's not been as good as I thought he was going to be. He's been probably our second best player, but just as a whole, I feel like the disappointment is there. And I want your opinion on the Coach Cal debate, because that has been such a raging debate, especially through the Kentucky community of, oh, get rid of Cal, his time is over. Like, look how bad, we've struggled over the last few years. He needs to go. What do you think about that conversation as a non-Kentucky fan from the outside looking in? What do you think about the whole fire Cal debate?
It's a tough question just because, like, in my mind, as kind of an outsider, who are you going to get that's better than Cal? Like, who's elevating this program that's available? And I guess, like, then the argument would just be, well, like, we're Kentucky, we can go get anybody, right? But I don't know. I mean, Cal I think he's been a good cultural fit overall. Maybe, I mean, I'm obviously an outsider, so maybe that's kind of hard for me to say, but, like, I just don't know who you get that would be better, that would be willing to leave where they are. Like, I've seen, like, Nate Oates get thrown around, but, like, is Nate Oates really going to go from Alabama to Kentucky? Like,
yeah, if I'm Nate Oates, I'm comfortable where I'm at. I'm exceeding expectations at a football school, like, similar to what Stoops is doing at Kentucky. Like, the expectations aren't that high, so when you're doing well, people are like, I think I agree with that. For me, my number one option for a post Cal would be Scott Drew. Like, I would throw all the money at Scott Drew. Like, Scott Drew is my guy. Like, I see people throwing around Bruce Pearl. No, I'm good. Bruce Pearl has never won anything meaningful. Get him away.
Yeah.
I don't even like him to begin with. I want Scott Drew because, number one, he can recruit. Number two, he can develop. And number three, he's very good schematically. So I'm on the Scott Drew train again. I don't know if he'd leave Baylor. And see, that's the thing. Kentucky fans are so, like, we're very arrogant, like, to the point where it's like we think anybody would just come here. And it's like, who are we going to get? Like you said, who are we going to get that's going to bring in the caliber of recruits that Cal has consistently brought in here? We've had the best players playing on this roster every single year for so long. And then that's where the argument comes, well, should win. He's underachieved with all that talent. But anyone with a base knowledge of college basketball knows that it's not that simple. The best team rarely wins it all. So and then a team like UNC didn't get who they wanted, so they just signed Hubert Davis. Like, Hubert Davis was not UNC's first option as far as I know, and they ended up with him. So it's not as simple as, oh, we're Kentucky, we can get whoever we want. So
yeah, I think I think you can get some guys just by virtue of, like, being Kentucky, like, right? Like, some guys will go to Kentucky just because of that. But you're not going to get the same caliber of player that you're getting under Cal, unless you're, getting some other really high-level recruiter. But, like, the name value is only going to do so much, especially in this era, as we talked about, where, like, you can make it anywhere. Like, you don't have to go to a blue blood to be a top 10 pick. Like, you don't have to go to Kentucky to put up, big numbers. So,
and that's what people don't get, man. Those times of the 2010s and the 2010s, like, those days are over. Where it's like, yeah, those years were dominated by the blue bloods for the most part. You had UNC win a couple in that time. You had Duke win a couple in that time. You had Kentucky win one in that time. You had, Villanova win a couple during that time. Those days aren't that, like, they're it's not the same to where, you've got the same quality of, again, next year's Kentucky recruiting class is like the days of old, where I don't know how Cal pulled this off, because he hasn't landed a recruiting class like this in a hot minute. It seemed like the recruiting game had kind of passed him by, and then all of a sudden he just pulls this out. But I guess I didn't even have this on the itinerary, but I do want your opinion on Kentucky's roster next year and, like, who they're bringing in and kind of what you think could look like, especially with those recruits we got. We got 4 top 10 players, DJ Wagner, Justin Edwards, Rob Dillingham, and Aaron Bradshaw are all top 10 players. And then Reed Shepherd obviously coming in as on the tail end of that recruiting class. What do you think about those guys? And what do you think they're going to do at Kentucky?
Yeah, I truthfully, like, haven't totally looked into a lot of the rosters and recruiting for next season. So there's really, like, only so much that I'd be able to comment on. I love Rob Dillingham. I think that's one of my big comments is, like, watching him play basketball is so funny because you can tell that, like, he's entertained by how good he is. Yeah. It's really funny. And yeah, he'll just shot selection maybe sometimes a little bit questionable, but, like,
I think if
Sometimes you
anyone
take
can
that.
get that figured out, Cal's always been good about getting these AAU dudes to come in and accept their role. I think that would be the case with Dillingham. Dillingham reminds me of like a slightly taller Tyler Eulis, maybe, like at least play style wise. He might not be as good and might not be as cerebral as Eulis was, but in
Mhm.
terms of play style, when it comes, I have like player comps for all these guys we have coming in, and for Rob Dillingham, it's Darius Garland. They're the same size.
Yeah.
They've got the ball on a string. They can shoot from all, or they can score from all three levels. So I see a lot of Darius Garland. He's like a more flashy Darius Garland.
Yeah.
So I think that's would be my player
Yeah.
comp
I
for him.
do I do think it's a big year for Cal though, because if you think back to the last time that the team build was primarily like, let's just get all these, highly rated freshmen, they missed the tournament.
Right.
Right. And so then at that point, Cal's like, all right, well, I'm going to go out and get some guys that I know can play. I'm going to go get Kellen Grady. I'm going to go get Oscar Shibwe. I'm going to go get Severe Wheeler, and make sure that, we don't completely collapse, like the bottom
Right.
doesn't fall out. So now he's like kind of going back to his roots a little bit. Like he's kind of going back to that like 2010s type of Cal team build. So I'm really curious to see how that works out for him.
Right. And it's unfortunate that had to happen during the COVID year, because I really do think, I mean, Devin Askew's bad, but outside of him, I think if Brandon Boston had a full off season to, figure his stuff out and get acclimated, if Terrence Clark didn't get injured, he was out for the whole year. Isaiah Jackson was pretty good, but like overall, number one, I don't think the recruits were at the level we thought they were. And then also they just didn't like I said, Clark was out for the whole season with injury, and Boston just didn't have. It was obvious he didn't have. I mean, look what he's done. He hasn't been great in the NBA, but like he's been decent for the Clippers in the NBA, and he's been like one of the best players in the G League over the last few years. So the guy can obviously hoop. And it's unfortunate that had to happen, because prior to that, the last time we had a team built that way was the 2017 Fox, Monk, Bam, Winion Gabriel, Sasha Kalia Jones, who wasn't very good, but like that was a crazy recruiting class. And I mean, we're a buzzer beater away from winning it all that year. UNC, Luke May, and all that shot he hit. But I think if we can even get close to that 2017 De'Aaron Fox, Malik, I mean, we haven't had a backcourt like that since Fox and Monk. So now, Dillingham and Wagner, and then I think Justin Edwards will be the best player on the team next year, and he's now ESPN's #1 player in the class and everything. But anyway, moving on to our last topic, what is your current top 5 teams? Just kind of, talk about each team and why you have them ranked where they currently are.
Yeah, so I did have more thoughts on Kentucky if you want to keep.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead, for sure.
Well, so the one note on the coaching thing is, the biggest like chaos scenario would be Rick Pitino.
Oh my God, Mitch Barnhart would never do that, but that would be insane.
That'd be so funny. I'm almost like, it'll never happen, but like I'm almost kind of.
I'm not even gonna lie to you. I would be down. Like if we were to hire Patino, first of all, I would think it was hilarious. Number 2, our fan base would literally implode. Number 3, that would like I said, Barnhart would never do that, but that would be crazy. Imagine that. What is Iona even? Are they doing anything this year? Like, are they even good?
They were supposed to be like far and away the best team in their conference. Like they're in the same conference that St. Peter's is in. And so in terms of like the talent on their team, they should be kind of clearing everybody.
Yeah.
For a while, they were like KenPom top 50, which is like way higher than any other team in that conference. But they haven't like really put it together. They're like second or third maybe right now.
Okay. I know St. Peter's isn't doing too hot this year.
No, they're not very good. No. So
yeah. I haven't even thought about it. Their coach, Shaheen Holloway, he went to Seton Hall, didn't he? Are they doing anything this year?
They showed some flashes at the beginning of the year. We kind of expected the defense to be pretty good just because that's what Shaheen Holloway can really coach. And they have like the length and stuff to make that work. He brought over Casey Ndefo from St. Peter's and he's been doing all right. But just overall, like the Big East is insane this year. Like there's so many really good teams and they're just not really equipped to compete with kind of the top tier of the conference right now. But they haven't been like bad, but they haven't really been that good either.
Marquette has been they've surprised me this year. Shaka, props to Shaka Smart. He's done a great job at Marquette. So I like Marquette this year. I think they're going to be a sleeper team in March.
Yeah, Marquette. I mean, I made a video about Marquette because to me, they are one of the biggest surprises of the year. I thought they were going to be absolutely terrible. Like, I
Yeah.
thought this team was going to be a complete disaster. They lost their two best players, one to graduation, and then one, Justin Lewis, he went to the NBA.
Mhm.
Or I don't even know if he is in the NBA. He might. I don't even
I
know
don't
if
think
he's
he's on a
I
roster,
don't think
but
he's on a roster anymore. Yeah. But I mean, he popped off. He averaged like 17 points a game and
yeah.
quickly was like getting pro looks, so he got out of there. And then they didn't add like a great recruiting class. They didn't bring in any really good transfers. It was just kind of like all these bench pieces that were returning, and they all just got better, which
Yeah.
like that never happens. Like you never
Yeah.
really find a team where they don't bring anybody really good back and suddenly
And
they're
everyone
good.
gets better. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that has to be a testament to coaching, I would say. And I've never been the biggest Shaka Smart proprietor, but he's I mean, props to him for making it happen. And I mean, that's gotta be a coaching thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've never doubted Shaka Smart's ability to win in the regular season. He's kind of always been able to do that, but he also hasn't won a tournament game since he was at VCU, and that was like
Yeah.
10 years ago. Like
Yeah.
he never won one at Texas. He lost
Yeah.
every time he got in. And then he lost by 30 against North Carolina last year in the tournament. So,
Right.
I mean, this is all like fine and well, and it's like a nice surprise that they're doing so well, but I mean, you kind of got to prove it at some point once you
Yeah,
get in the
he's
market.
got Rick Barnes syndrome for sure.
Yeah. You mentioned Antonio Reeves. I've actually been like really impressed with Antonio Reeves.
Oh yeah.
Not even just from like the jump in level of competition, but just like they needed to bring somebody in to beat Kellen Grady, basically.
Mhm.
And he's kind of done that. They're just
Yeah.
like, we need somebody to score and shoot like around 40% from three. And he's been
Mhm.
doing that.
Yeah.
CJ Frederick, though, on the other hand, like they didn't even ask him to do that. Like they're just like, come in and hit
Hit
shots.
2 threes a game and we're happy with you, bro. And
Yeah,
he hasn't been able to do it.
it's just not working out. One
Yeah.
thing that I saw, so I've been using shot quality a lot recently, which I don't know if you're familiar with shot quality.
Mhm.
But basically they just look at like where teams' shots are coming from and like valuing like shots at the rim and shots from three better, just as like good shot selection, right? Um, Kentucky is top. Let me put it up. So they're 39th in the country in finishing at the rim, and they're 327th in attacking the rim. So like they're really good when they actually get to the rim, but they never even try to get there.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that is the fact that our guards don't have the burst. Like outside of Severe Wheeler, who is literally 5'5", we
Yeah.
don't have any guard. Like I love Cason Wallace, and he'll have a tough drive to the rim every now and then, but
Mhm.
he's taken way more jump shots than I think anybody would have expected him to this year.
Yeah.
So that has been a weird thing, and I think that's also a scheme thing. Like Coach Cal's been scheming for taking threes way more than usual. Like Coach Cal's one of people's biggest complaints with Cal over the years is that we don't shoot enough threes. And this year we've just been shooting way more threes than typical with only one shooter on the team up to this stage. So it's like I think that's a big reason why we've been so inconsistent. We got one guy who can shoot consistently, and yet we're shooting way more threes than usual. We've got Wallace attempting 3 threes a game. We've got
Mhm.
Frederick throwing up threes and they're not going in, and then Reeves really being the only guy capitalizing on that. But I'm glad Reeves is getting some respect. It's still weird to me he's coming off the bench. I don't really understand that, but I guess it's just a lineup thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to your point, like Wallace has at least been a viable 3-point
Way better
shooter.
than I thought he'd be. I mean,
Yeah.
he was shooting over 40% from three up until like a couple weeks ago,
Mhm.
and then
What can you explain to me where the, I guess, disrespect for Severe Wheeler is coming from? Like where, like I just want to know what that's based on for people, because in my mind, like I don't understand what he's not doing that people just want him to be able to do. Like it's not like first of all, he's 5'9", right?
yeah,
Like he's not he's not some like crazy like explosive, point guard. He's never been that great of a shooter. So like if
right.
you're mad at him for not being able to shoot, it's like he's never been able to do that. So
He's shooting 38% from three this year. Like he's not even been a terrible shooter. So, or it might be lower now, but he was shooting in the high 30s. He was over 40% at one point a couple weeks ago. But my explanation for that is there has been a wave of UK fans who have just come out of nowhere to just blame all our problems on Wheeler. And it's like, yes, we have looked better with him on the bench, but I think that is just more a testament to we were asking him to do too much. We were asking him to play 40 minutes a game as a primary ball handler. And since he does use so much burst and speed and stuff, he gets worn out super quickly. But he still has to play 40 minutes. And his biggest weapon is his burst and his speed. But you take that away when he's tired, he's been on the court for 40 minutes, and he's no longer able to use that to his advantage. So that's where the problem lies. I think he is a perfect sixth man to come in and bring energy off the bench and bring speed off the bench, but he just needs to be used more sparingly. And I think that's why we've played better with him on the bench. But like we played Ole Miss. I know probably 8 people other than Kentucky fans in the whole country probably watched that game the other day because who cares? But we lose that. We would have lost to Ole Miss, who is the worst team in the SEC. We lose that game without Wheeler. Like Wheeler, we were missing Cason Wallace. He was out with an injury, so Wheeler had to step up. Wheeler rolled his ankle in the first half, and I'm like, he's out. We're done. Like this thing's over. He came back in the second half. He had 9 assists, 0 turnovers, and he did what he had to do, and we won the game. A lot of that was Reeves dropping almost 30, but without like Wheeler was our second best player, really. So I don't know, man. I was having that. I got suspended on TikTok again because one of the Kentucky fans in my chat was telling me Wheeler sucks and stuff. And all I did was explain why he doesn't suck and why he's still valuable to this team. And I just want people to hold, like, nobody is hating on CJ Frederick the way that they're hating on Severe Wheeler. CJ Frederick has been way worse than Severe Wheeler this year for Kentucky. And nobody's other than, I wish he'll start making some shots. That's all the only criticism he's getting, but people want to act like Severe Wheeler is the worst player to ever put on a Kentucky uniform. And it's like, we're not even holding these guys to the same standard. And it's really frustrating to me when a guy like Wheeler, he knows he's not going to the NBA. So you can't use the excuse of, he just cares about his NBA draft stock. He's using Kentucky for the NBA because he knows he's not going to the league. So he's putting on this uniform every day to come play for this university, to play for Kentucky. And we still got a section of fans. I mean, he's one of our own. He's one of ours. And you got a section of fans who hate him. And it's just like, I mean, I'm sure the kid opens up social media and sees people ripping him a new one 24/7. And I'm sure he's looking at himself like, hey, I know I haven't been perfect, but why is Frederick not getting the same treatment? Why is Toppin not getting the same treatment? Toppin's been better lately, but for the first half of the season, Toppin was unplayable. So it's just like, I don't know. I've gone off on a tangent now about the Wheeler situation.
Yeah.
But I get it. I've been critical of him plenty. That's fine. It's fine to criticize a player, but the same people who hate on him constantly need to also have an equal amount of praise for him when he plays well and wins us a game like he did against Ole Miss. But you don't see those guys praising him. You're like, they're like, oh, well, he only had 4 points. It's like, well, he's not out there to score 20 points.
Right.
He's out there to facilitate the offense and get 9 assists with 0 turnovers like he did and play good defense. He forced a 10-second violation he clamped up this dude in the backcourt. He couldn't even cross half court and got a 10-second violation. So don't see anybody talking about that. But I don't know. I don't get it. Criticize him. That's fine. I've done plenty of that. But also give the kid props when he plays well. That's all I'm asking.
Sure.
And that's all. People, if you're a fan, don't sit here and blindly hate your own player who's putting on your uniform to play for your team. And you want to, oh man, that drives me so nuts, dude.
Yeah, I can tell.
Have you noticed, this is on a different note, but have you noticed how bad Oscar Tshiebwe's been defensively this year? Like I love Oscar. He's still our best player. He's our heartbeat. He's the best rebounder in the country. He's a great player. Top 5 player in the country this year still, in my opinion. But God, he's been bad defensively.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that is you kind of have to these teams that are playing Kentucky, like they're gonna look for the mismatch wherever they can. And when CJ Frederick is playing as bad as he is, like he's not gonna be on the court. Like, that's not the matchup that people are going to go at.
Right.
People are going to go at Oscar instead. And also, like, I do think some of it is like, this guy dominates around the basket. Let's get him away from the basket as much as we can. Like, let's try to scheme him out to the perimeter where we can cook him. So I don't even know that he's necessarily like, I don't think he got any worse at defense. I just think teams like know how to.
They figured out how to exploit his weaknesses. Well, and it's not even – he's actually good at one-on-one if he gets switched onto a guard and he's out on the perimeter guarding a guard, like more often than not, he gets a stop. Like he doesn't get really cooked on the outside. He moves well laterally. Like he's long. He knows how to use his length to defend. He actually, when he gets switched onto a guard, he doesn't get cooked really. It's more like he gets lost on pick and roll defense. Like they'll come set a screen and he'll go guard the wrong guy. He'll go guard the guard instead of staying on his man. And then our guard is still guarding their guard. So then the big is just wide open for a score. And like, that's been his issue, is just I swear to you, Kansas scored 20 plus points on us just attacking Oscar in a pick and roll. So I don't know. It's just an interesting topic because he was actually like good defensively last year. Yeah. And this year, he's on the Naismith or the Kareem, whatever, the defensive player of the year watch list right now. I'm like, we're not watching it. Whoever is voting for this is not watching Kentucky games, because I don't know how he's on the defensive player of the year watch list.
Yeah. I think that's probably just a lot of like box score watching. It's just like,
it has to be.
He's averaging like more than a steal a game, more than a block a game.
Yeah.
And people like to lump in rebounding with like their, view of somebody as a defender. And like, we know Oscar's he's leading the nation in rebounding, right?
Yeah.
So like, there's no like best rebounder award. So like kind of gets lumped in, I think.
Yeah. Before we get into the top 5, I actually do want to know, we talked about this in our preseason podcast where I asked you who you think like the top 5 Wooden Award, like Naismith Award, who do you think the top 5 prospects or the top 5 guys were to win National Player of the Year? Where are you at in that conversation right now? Like, it doesn't have to be 5, but like obviously Zach Edey's probably the front runner for everybody. But I think we said Marcus Sasser in the preseason. He hasn't quite been what we thought he was going to be. But like, what do you think about the whole National Player of the Year race right now? Like, who would you say other than Zach Edey are kind of in your conversation for that?
Yeah, well, I think to the point of Zach Edey, like, it seems like people are already talking about it like it's a done deal. And I can't remember the last time we were talking about National Player of the Year like it was completely locked up in like January.
Right.
So that's crazy right there. Zach Edey, the guy's a cheat code. Like, yeah, he's
7'4" and he's huge and
disgustingly efficient. Like, he completely, like, he impacts the game on both ends because you have to double him. Right. So that creates mismatches for you elsewhere. And then like on the defensive end, like, how are you supposed to drive? Like, you can't. Yeah. He's taking up the entire paint. There's nothing you can do. Yeah. So as far as other candidates for the award, like that then becomes like a really interesting conversation because you kind of just naturally compare them to Zach Edey. But other guys like, Marcus Sasser hasn't really been.
It's pretty wild that Oscar Tshiebwe is averaging almost 17 and 15, and he's not in the conversation. Like, I get it because Kentucky hasn't been great this year, but the dude is still statistically a top 2 player in the country when you take it all into account.
Right. And a lot of the guys who are like really putting up crazy numbers are doing it for mid-majors too. Which, like
dude at Detroit Mercy is putting up 25s again, isn't he?
Yeah, he's trying to take a shot at the all-time scoring record that Pete Maravich set.
He was in a conversation for transferring to Kentucky last year, and then he was just like, I'm just going to go back to Detroit Mercy and just keep doing what I was doing.
Yeah, but so kind of back to your initial question, I would say like Zach is the runaway favorite, but after that, I would say probably Jalen Wilson because he stepped in and been that number 1 guy for Kansas. Yeah. Brandon Miller like kind of has a case too.
He's got to be in there, yeah.
He's got to be in there. Like, not even just best freshman. Like, even just saying like he's the best freshman kind of does him a little bit of a disservice. He's one of the best players. Period.
He'll be SEC Player of the Year without question, in my opinion.
Yeah. So then even after that, like once you even get into the 3rd or 4th guy, it's like, does he really have a shot? Like, you can talk about Tubelis from Arizona, who's been really good. You can talk about even like Trace Jackson Davis, but who's really popped off in the last couple weeks and kind of put the team on his back. But beyond that, it's like it felt like last year around this time, it was like, all right, we could talk about Keegan Murray. We could talk about Johnny Davis.
Right.
Ochai Agbaji. Like, there's all these guys that we can talk about And it was like debated like right up into the end, like, are we really giving this award to Oscar? Right. Like,
Yeah.
and this year it's kind of the opposite. So
Yeah. I feel like for most, it was probably always apparent last year that it was Oscar because again, he was putting up historic numbers, like stuff we hadn't seen in 40 years, you know. So it's like I feel
yeah,
like it was blatant, but there was other guys who were just like Agbaji at Kansas, and Keegan Murray was putting up insane numbers for Iowa. So yeah, it's like there's nobody else in the country statistically putting up anything close to what Edey's putting up. I mean, he's 21 points, 14 boards, probably I don't even know how many blocks, probably 2 plus. Like the dude is clearly going to win National Player of the Year. Like
yeah,
there's no, unless he gets hurt. That's the only way I could think of he wouldn't end up winning the award. But
right.
using that to segue into our last part, who are your top 5 teams? Again, not really necessarily taking into account what the current rankings are. Who do you just think the 5 best teams in the country are at this stage in the season?
I think right now I would still have Houston as my number one team. I think they kind of get forgotten about because like they play in the American, they don't play a lot of games on national TV. And then you have stuff like the loss to Temple, which like that I think turned a lot of people off to Houston. Not me really though, because in that game was just weird. Like it was just a weird game. Temple
Yeah.
didn't score from the field for the last 7 minutes of that game. Like Houston was doing what they needed to do. They just weren't scoring,
Right.
which was kind of uncharacteristic for them. I mean, they're still top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. Their only other loss was to Alabama. It's like, are we really going to fault somebody for a loss against Alabama?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, then they back it up. Like when they get to the tournament, it seems like every year. I would still say that like they're the team that I feel most confident in being good. In a year where it seems like nobody really wants to be that good, I'm still pretty confident that Houston is really good.
And Kelvin Sampson's one of the best coaches in the country. Like
Yeah.
probably the most underrated coach in the entire country.
Yeah, and then after that, I would say I honestly think Alabama might be 2 for me. Which I know they just lost that like 30 point, like whatever, 25 point loss to Oklahoma. Obviously, not good. But then like they followed that up with a 60-point win
Yeah.
against Vanderbilt.
They beat the brakes off
They
Vandy.
killed them. And that's like that kind of is what separates them for me is like that win against Vanderbilt made me think like, yeah, that Oklahoma win was just kind of like, or loss was just kind of like a one-off.
Makes up for it, in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, I think it does. And then you look at, I mean, who else did Alabama lose to? They lost to Gonzaga by 10 in a game where like there were 190 points scored in that game.
Yeah.
And that's just like going to happen. Like
Right.
Alabama's whole thing is like, we're just going to outscore you and like, we're going to outrun you and we're going to outrun you and outgun you. Like that's kind of their thing. And Gonzaga is like a team that's uniquely equipped to kind of match that as far as pace and ability to score goes. And then their other loss was, it wasn't, who did they lose to other than that? Oh, UConn. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like I'm not going to fault anybody for a loss to UConn. I do
Yeah.
think I probably have UConn just outside the top 5 in terms of like ceiling goes.
UConn was going crazy at that time too. That was like in the middle of their really like good stretch. So
yeah, and then they hit conference play and like kind of fell apart. But we've kind of seen what the peak for UConn is, so I'm kind of hoping that they can catch fire again, like going into March. But my big worry with UConn was like they're peaking way too early. Like this is one of my preseason predictions was like UConn is going to catch fire at the end of the season and win the Big East tournament, and then they caught fire at the beginning of the season, and then now they like kind of suck. And I think they're still like good enough to figure it out, but they've kind of gotten exposed in a couple ways. Like they don't really have a point guard at all. They have Jordan Hawkins, who he's really good at like running off of screens and hitting threes. Like he's going to be an NBA player, but then, I mean, they don't have a creator really. They want Andre Jackson to do it, but he's a forward. So after Alabama, I would probably say like I have to go Purdue at this point. Like I do have some reservations about Purdue just because I don't know how sustainable it is for this backcourt to be playing as good as they are. And I think at some point, like I'm not like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but the foul numbers for Zach Edey make absolutely no sense. Like they just do not call fouls on him. And I don't really understand. Like, it's just not physically possible, right? Like people are driving and he's making contact with them, but the refs are just like, yeah, we're not going to call the foul. Yeah. Which they do for like pretty much every other big. So like my big question for Purdue is like, what happens when Zach Edey gets into foul trouble?
Yeah.
Because we haven't really seen it. Like he's been able to play 35 minutes a game or whatever. But what happens once he gets into foul trouble? Because then that takes away like a huge advantage for you. And then you're still working with like a undersized freshman backcourt who to their credit have been playing really well. But again, I don't really know how sustainable that is. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I mean, in March, the microscope's going to be on at that point. You're probably not going to be able to get away with as much in like in a tournament setting. You're not going to be able to get away with as much contact. You're not going to be able to get away with as much. So I think that is a valid concern.
Yeah, but again, they have one loss in a power conference. Like it's hard and it was to Rutgers, and Rutgers is like, I mean,
they're decent.
They're not like an elite team, but they're a good team. Yeah. Like they're solid. Four, I'd probably say Arizona. And it's weird for me to have them as a top 5 team because like there's still a part of me that thinks UCLA is better than them. UCLA just they got dudes, and
yeah, they're legit.
But again, like I've had this take for a while. It's been in my my queue of videos that I want to make, but I think Tommy Lloyd is a top 10 coach in college basketball. And I don't know how much of a hot take people think that is, but I just think like generally speaking, people give that designation to guys who have been doing it for, 15 years and winning a lot and like accumulating accolades like Sweet 16s and Elite 8s and stuff. He's only been there for 2, but his resume after like a year and a half is as good as like most other coaches are. But I would say Arizona is probably deserving of a top 5 spot at this point. I'm just a little bit scared with how their success is tied to Kirk Kriisa. Like I love Kirk Kriisa in terms of like he's good for college basketball. He's like he's entertaining, like he does his thing, but if I was an Arizona fan, I'd be really, really nervous about when is he going to shoot us out of a game because it's coming. Like, it's coming.
Right.
And he's not the type of player who he misses some shots and then is like, all right, guys, I'm going to like back off. He's like, no, I'm going to keep shooting. Start making them. So that makes me a little bit nervous for Arizona, but I think they're at their best. They're definitely a top 5 team in the country. And so I think that's probably what you have to judge it on. And then this most recent loss, I think I'm out on Tennessee as a top 5 team. I think that Florida game really takes me out on them because I get that like the defense is so good, but they just have way too many games where the offense just seems like they didn't come to play. And when you combine that with a coach who like notoriously does not get out of the first weekend, then I'm like pretty nervous.
Yeah. And I think that is their biggest problem. Tennessee's biggest problem without a shadow of a doubt is that offense. And it's like they don't have a superstar. Like most good teams have that go-to guy they can go to. They don't. They thought it was going to be Josiah Jordan-James this year. He's been banged up. He hasn't been the guy they thought he was going to be. Vescovy, I feel like, is playing worse than he did last year. Zakai Ziegler is he's decent. He's inefficient though. He's not, he's inconsistent as well. So, and they really don't have a consistent front court as either. Plavsic is mid and Olivier Kamwa is inconsistent, but solid.
Yeah.
Julian Phillips isn't anything crazy. So I do think that that's their biggest pitfall. And I would say I'm probably out on Tennessee as well.
So then I guess the 5th team for me would probably end up being Virginia. My heart wants to say Baylor. And I know that that's not like the correct answer for a lot of people, but when you look at the teams that they've lost to, they have 5 losses to all top 20 teams. Do you have Baylor on there? Yeah.
Bro, see? I was going to try to introduce that as like some crazy thing, but you beat me to it.
I really, really think this Baylor team is better than the record suggests.
I love Baylor, bro. I think Baylor is legit.
I think they're so good. And like we know that backcourt play is the thing that gets it done in March. They have one of the best backcourts in the country.
Yep.
I mean, yeah. So for the 5 spot is between Virginia and Baylor, and Virginia did beat Baylor at one point this year. So I guess I'll go Virginia.
You called it on Keontae George, by the way, in the preseason. That was one of the questions about freshmen that, who are some freshmen you think are going to go crazy? I remember, and Keontae George was like your number one guy. So shout out to you, because you definitely called that. I thought he was going to be good. I didn't think he was going to be as good as he's been.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only guy that I could have said that would have been the better answer would be Brandon Miller.
Yeah,
so,
Keontae's definitely been
the
second best guard, or the second best freshman in the entire country this year.
Yeah, I've done enough talking to give your top 5.
Oh no. What I was about to say is I'm not going to go off. I'm not going to talk as much about it because I don't know as much. Like you're a college basketball guy as a whole. I know enough, but I'm not nearly as like knowledgeable about all these teams and stuff. So I won't go on as much. Personally, I know this might be crazy after their Oklahoma loss. I still have Bama as my number one. I think their ability to score the ball, they have the best pure scorer in the country on their team. They have everybody can shoot. If one guy is off, if Brandon Miller has a bad game in March, you got 3 other dudes that are going to score. They're deep in the backcourt with Jaden Bradley and Mark Sears and Javon Kennerly. There's almost no holes. You got Bediako down low, providing physicality and rebounding and defense. There's no real issues there, and I think Nate Oates is a great coach. So for me, Bama is my number one still, despite, because again, everyone's losing games they shouldn't lose. Everybody has a bad, quote unquote, bad loss. Everybody has losses they shouldn't have. So personally, I'm not overreacting to that Bama loss to Oklahoma, because like we said, they came back and beat Vandy by 60 the next game. So it's obvious that they were just really off that game. It was a road game. It was a weird game. So I don't fault them too much. I still have Bama at number one. I got Purdue at number 2. They only have 1 L, right? Only 1 L, and that was record.
Yeah.
Edie is National Player of the Year. I don't know about the supporting cast as much. I'm not overly knowledgeable on the rest of that team, but just on paper, I don't really see how I could put them anywhere other than 2 at this stage in the season with only 1 L and with the best player in the country. And then I have Houston at 3. I understand putting them above Purdue because I do think they could potentially be a better overall team.
Yeah.
Jarris Walker, he's continued playing well, right? I remember earlier in the year he was playing pretty well. Is he still playing at a high level?
Yeah, he's still been good. He does a lot of things that and I hate when people say this, but he does a lot of things that like don't necessarily show up in a box score.
Yeah.
And I hate when people say that because it's like kind of a cliche to like when people talk about like a player that isn't actually that good.
Yeah.
Like, well, you can't just look at the box score, dude, because he does all these things that don't show up. But he's like the good version of that. He's like he's like a guy who does like a lot of the little things. So
yeah. So I mean, again, Kelvin Sampson, in my opinion, is one of the better coaches in the country. He just doesn't get talked about enough. Like you said, they have a history of making a little run every March. So I got Houston at number 3. I got Arizona at number 4. This is my base knowledge. I've only watched a couple Arizona games, but Kerr Kriisa and Santiago Vescovi are the same player. They're the exact same player.
I've never heard that before.
Is that a semi-valid take, would you say? Because from what I've watched, they're both they play identical.
I mean, other than just, I think like in terms of what they're asked to do is a little bit different. Like Kreese is the guy with the ball in his hands, and Vescovi is more like that 2 guard. But
yeah,
I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, that was just I noticed that a while ago. I was like, and that came to my mind, and I'm like, am I crazy? Because they seem very, very similar in terms of the way they play. But anyway, and then I got Baylor at 5. I don't know if I said this before the podcast started or during, I don't remember, but Scott Drew, to me, if Cal ever leaves, Scott Drew is my number 1 guy to come to Kentucky. I love Scott Drew. I think he is, like, in terms of just as a whole, I think he's the best coach in the country right now. I think he was number 2 when Jay Wright was coaching. Now that Jay Wright's out, I'm going Scott Drew. I think he's the best coach in the country currently. I think Baylor's one of those teams that they struggled a little bit early on, but they're so talented and they're so deep and they're so well coached that I think that they're going to peak at the perfect time towards the end of the season. They're going to
Yeah.
hit that stride, and with
Yeah.
how much parity there's been, how kind of mid everybody has been for the most part, you've got certain teams that are peaking at the wrong times. Like you said, UConn peaked at the wrong time. I think Purdue might have peaked at the wrong time. So I think Houston and Baylor for me would probably be the two teams that I would be most comfortable assuming will make a deep run in March.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because those are like the two that I can remember talking about at the very beginning of the season.
You did. You know what you're talking about, dude.
I mean,
I
do my best. Scott Drew's awesome. I do love Scott Drew, and it's like everything that man touches turns to gold. Like even the fact that his like longtime assistant went to Kansas State, Jerome Tang, and they were supposed to be like the worst team in the Big 12 this year, and they're like top 3. Just crazy. Like everything Scott Drew just like works out.
And I could see him, I don't know, man. I could see him being like, okay, it's time to take that next step. It's time to go up to a blue blood or something, because he's done great at Baylor. But I mean, imagine Scott Drew with Kentucky's resources. Like just thinking about that, I hope that he's the guy, man. There's no guarantee he would take the job. He might love Baylor and want to be there forever, but it's very reminiscent, in my opinion, of Cal at Memphis, Coach Cal at Memphis, doing well at Memphis, taking that next step to go up to Kentucky. That's what reminds Scott Drew has been at Baylor for a while. He's won a championship there. He's doing really well. If he wants to take that next step, dude, I would throw so much money at Scott Drew.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough though. Cause like with Memphis to Kentucky is like a clear step. But when you're talking about one of the best programs in the best conference in college basketball, where you've already won a title, it's going to be hard to get him away. Like it's not very often that you find a guy who's like an elite coach that's like succeeding where he is, and then is also willing to like go somewhere else.
Right.
That doesn't really happen a whole lot. Like
I think Chris Beard was probably the last.
I was going to say, like, Chris Beard is the only like one.
He's the last example of that, and I still feel like Texas Tech to Texas was a little bit of a lateral move for him, but
yeah.
Also,
it was like his dream job. It was his alma mater. So like,
okay.
From
well,
that
I actually
standpoint, like I can understand it, but yeah, I mean, based on how things have turned out, like maybe he would have been better off staying in Texas Tech.
Yeah, that was something I wanted. I also real quick wanted to touch on a couple of teams who have been surprisingly bad this year. For me, not that Texas has been bad. Obviously, they had kind of a crazy situation with Beard, but I mean, they're still a top 10 team, even without their head coach. So shout out to Texas for keeping it up. But Illinois is the most surprising team for me this year. Again, they haven't sucked per se, but they certainly have not been as good as I thought they were going to be with Matthew Meyer and Terrence Shannon. And, Coleman Hawkins is decent. And then, of course, Sky Clark leaving the program. They even with him leaving the program, they've still got solid guard play. So I've been really surprised with Illinois' struggles this year.
Yeah, Illinois was my preseason pick to win the Big Ten, because I would still maintain that they're probably the most talented team, like on paper. Like they just have so many guys who can beat you. It's so hard to find a roster in college basketball where they have like 4 guys who can beat you,
Right.
Yeah, and to your point, like they haven't been bad, but there's definitely been some like mid-season there was some like chemistry issues, like stuff coming out of the locker room. Like Sky Clark ended up leaving, and after that, like they kind of got better after he left. So I don't really know if there's anything there, but I've been a little disappointed with Illinois, I would say, but
Creighton's the other one. Creighton, I don't know how they're doing lately. Creighton has really
they've turned a corner. Creighton's turned a corner. They absolutely have. Like the thing with them was Ryan Kalkbrenner was hurt, and so they came back from Maui and they lost like 6 straight games, and I think maybe 3 of those were games where he wasn't playing. But since then, like let me look back through January. Okay, so since January 14th, they beat Providence, they beat Butler, they dropped 104 points on St. John's. They beat Xavier by almost 20. So I mean, they've kind of turned things around. Like I would still have them in that upper tier of the Big East. So they're on the upswing right now. would
I
say.
remember they stole Baylor Shireman from us because we really wanted him. I don't know how hard we were actually pursuing him, but I remember he was like the biggest name of transfers we were going to land. We didn't land him, so we kind of just went ahead with Reeves. It was kind of our backup plan, but I'd wager to say Reeves has had a better season than Shireman from what I can tell. I don't know if how valid that is, but
Yeah, that's I don't know. I'm a Shireman guy, so I'm probably a little
oh,
more
I
biased,
wanted him
but
bad. I wanted him real bad, but
yeah, he would have been good for you. Like there have been a lot of guys who've transferred up a level this year that have like turned out that have
yeah.
actually been good. So
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about in my live earlier was like people don't realize the gap from like lower tier schools to high tier schools
yeah,
in basketball isn't that crazy. Like you've got 5-star recruits who are worse at basketball than Antoine Davis at, I think that's his name at Detroit
mhm,
Mercy, or you've got 5-star recruits who are playing this year who are not better than Baylor Shireman at basketball. So it's like, I mean, those dudes they're at lower tier schools. You got, I mean, CJ Frederick has played Power 5 basketball his whole career, and Antonio Reeves is better than him at basketball. It's just like Antonio Reeves came from Illinois State. So it's like the difference in talent from smaller schools to bigger schools in basketball. It's like people are used to football where it's like, yeah, a mid-major in football is never going to win a national championship. But in basketball, man, I mean, St. Peter's made the Elite Eight last year. You've
yeah,
had so many upsets are so prevalent in college basketball, and people are like Tennessee fans were in my live. Oh, our season's over. We lost to Florida, dude. What are you talking about? Like y'all are gonna be okay. Like that maybe that showed you're not as elite as you thought you were, but you're gonna be fine. Like
yeah,
that's the part about college basketball. I feel like not casual fans, but like the majority of people don't understand that the best team doesn't always win. So
yeah.
just and the best players don't always go to the best schools.
True.
So
Yeah, I think there's honestly, I think there's a lot more teams that I can say I thought would be bad and ended up being good than the opposite. Like there haven't really been a lot of teams where I thought they would be, a consistent top 20 team and they haven't they haven't been bad for reasons that aren't like injuries or
right,
anything. Like
right.
probably the only one I can really think of is probably Duke. Like Duke is running into this I mean it is sort of like a 2020 Kentucky issue where like they have all these freshmen and just like none of them are that good.
Yeah. Yeah, none for real. Outside of Filipowski, I don't think any of them have panned. I mean, Derek Lively was a top 3 recruit, and he stinks. Like Derek Lively's just straight up bad.
Yeah.
Like Dariq Whitehead hasn't lived up to the expectations. Tyrese Proctor hasn't been great. So even like Jeremy Roach coming back, I thought he was going to go crazy this year. He's been serviceable. He hasn't been great or even really good, I would say. Just they're weird. They're so
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think maybe Shire's not that guy. I don't know. Also, I don't like we haven't talked about this at all. Louisville, bro. What happened? How are they so bad? Like seriously makes no sense. I understand it's Kenny Payne's first year. I get all that, but dude, they might be the worst Power 5 college basketball team I've ever seen.
They're really bad. They're really, really
They
bad.
are
And this isn't the most like and even that like wasn't it's not super like maybe how bad they are is
yeah.
probably the surprise. I didn't think they'd be any good though.
They have 3 wins in January.
They just yeah, they had no guards like at all.
Right.
They had L. Ellis and
Who's a shot chucker, an inefficient shot
he was
chucker.
a shot chucker who hadn't even he was a JUCO transfer last year who barely played
Yeah,
20 minutes a game.
he didn't
So
even
like
play last year, yeah.
he's suddenly stepping into being the lead guard, and that's kind of it. Like they have one other guard who's a freshman,
Mhm.
and that's it. Like anyone else in that roster who can play in the backcourt is a walk on.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
L. Ellis, like some other freshman whose name is escaping me, and walk ons, and like you're
Yeah.
just not going to win that way.
No. And then, I mean, even front court play, like they thought Brendan Huntley Atfield was going to be a great addition. He's not been that good.
Yeah,
You've got, Jalen Withers isn't that great. Sidney Curry's not that great. Like
Mhm.
they're just not good. And I've seen Louisville fans like, oh, fire Payne already. Like, get rid of him already. I think you give the guy 2 or 3 years to try to implement a culture and implement a system
Yeah.
first.
And I don't think they gave him. I don't know what the expectation was. I can't remember exactly when he got hired, but I don't know what the expectation was because from what I
It was
remember, they
late.
didn't like give him a ton of time to recruit anybody. So then like
No.
the recruiting results were bad and people are surprised by that. Like I
Yeah,
don't I
yeah.
don't really
Well, he
understand like
still landed a 4-star Kamari Lands,
yeah.
who hasn't really done anything this year, but he landed him, and then he was in the running for Amani Bates, who just wanted to stay home and, shoot 80 shots a game
And
for
play for
Eastern
a better
Michigan.
team.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is crazy to think about, but, like, outside of that, I mean, yeah, I don't think they because didn't they lose their last, like, 10 games last year? I'm pretty sure they lost, like they went on a crazy losing streak last year at the end. So it's like they already weren't good.
Yeah. I mean, it just already wasn't a
And
very
then
good
they lost.
situation.
I mean, Noah Locke left because
Mhm.
he was there from Florida, and then he left, and he's on Providence, isn't he?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they Providence, they did some work in the offseason. I
Yeah,
rock with
low key.
Providence. Ed Cooley's cool too.
Yeah.
Did you see what man, I don't know if you have anywhere to be. I'm kind of drawing this out a little bit, but
Nah.
did you see what Bryce Hopkins was said? Like he came out and said yesterday. Did you see anything about that?
No, why? What do you say?
Basically, he came into an interview and he went full blown like I've never seen a player be this candid about his previous spot. Mostly it's like coach, like not coach speak, but like media trained. Oh, it was a good opportunity, but I wanted to do. He straight up just like went off on Cal and Kentucky. Basically, it wasn't anything crazy. All he said was he was like, I should have chosen Providence straight out of high school. It was a mistake going to Kentucky. And then he said, there were people in my ear telling me to go to Kentucky, but I wanted to go to Providence. And then he said, at Kentucky, I always had to look over my shoulder. Every little mistake was under a microscope, and Coach Cal would just pull me for any sort of mistake in game, and I never got to play. And, here, Coach Cooley lets me be myself. He literally said verbatim in the interview that he lets him do whatever he wants. He was like, Ed Cooley lets me do whatever I want, so I'm just comfortable here. It's like, bro, I'm sorry, but when you come to Kentucky and you got dudes that are as good as you, if Jacob Toppin was on Providence right now, we might be seeing similar results. Like it's not like Hopkins was just the clear-cut better player. You know what I mean? Like last year we had Brooks and Toppin Keon Brooks and Jacob Toppin at the 4.
Yeah.
So, and you see what Keon Brooks is doing at Washington this year. He's playing pretty well. So, like it's not like I don't know, expecting to be able to do whatever you want without having to worry about making mistakes. It's just not possible at a place like Kentucky, which is just loaded with guys. And you go to Providence, you're instantly their best player. Whereas at Kentucky, you were the third string power forward. So I don't know. I just didn't know if you heard about that or what you might think about that. Like I don't blame him for what he was doing, but I don't know what else he really expected.
Yeah. Obviously I'm not like in the building, but it's always weird for me when guys are like this coach who has won national championships didn't realize that I was like better than all the guys he was playing.
Yeah.
Like I think he like would know that.
Yeah.
Like and I mean bottom line, like Bryce Hopkins was playing he was playing 6 minutes a game. Like he wasn't seeing the floor, and like even when he was out there, it's not like he was.
Yeah, he had like one good game against LSU. He had like 14 points.
Yeah, but other than that, he shot 40% from the field. Like that's just not. Just not going to get it done. So
yeah,
I don't know. That's always weird to me because like I do think sometimes coaches like don't totally realize what they have. But I don't know. I just hear it a little too often for it to be true all the time.
And I mean, when you got 11 dudes who are good enough to play, someone's going to take a back seat. Like we had junior Keon Brooks and junior Jacob Toppin. You got two dudes who have been around for a while who have just proven themselves already, whereas Hopkins hadn't proved himself yet. And same thing with like Damian Collins. Damian Collins didn't transfer. They asked Damian, and he's not done well this year for various reasons that are honestly out of his control. His father passed away before the season, like super unexpectedly, and he lost 15 pounds because of that whole ordeal. So like Damian Collins, I thought he was going to be way better this year, but again, I'm not holding that against him. Sure. But like they interviewed Damian Collins after Hopkins transferred last year, and they were like, what do you think about not playing much this year? And like, what do you think about next year where you also might not play as much? And he was like, I trust Coach Cal. I'm along for the ride. I think he's going to do what's best for me, so I'm good with it. So like that's two extremely different viewpoints on the situation where it's like Collins and Hopkins were in the exact same situation last year. One guy got mad and transferred to go take all the shots. The other guy understands that it's a process and that it's going to take a while for him to be ready to play on the – because sorry, but the lights at Providence are not nearly as bright as the lights are at Kentucky. Like there's not even close to the same expectations. So
There's, like, barely electricity in Providence, so,
Yeah,
yeah, the lights are
yeah.
not
Their
not
practice
as bright.
facilities from 1967.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like shout out to Providence, shout out to Bryce Hopkins. He's hooping this year. There's no other way around it. He's
Sure.
great, but like, what did anyone else expect? And then Kentucky fans using this situation to trash Coach Cal. It's like, yeah, Coach Cal fumbled the bag on this one. He's like, bro, what did you want him to do? Like Brooks and Toppin were both very solid last year. They were both good for us. Like Keon Brooks is single-handedly the reason why we beat Kansas by 20 at Kansas. Like, what do you want him to do? So
Yeah.
people love using any opportunity, and it's also like Johnny Juzang. He transferred from Kentucky. Johnny Juzang, his freshman year at Kentucky, was horrible. He shot 27% from
Yeah.
the field. From the field, he shot
Yeah.
27%, not from three, from the field. So he barely played, and then he transferred because he said he was homesick. He wanted to go back to California. Going from Los Angeles, California, to Lexington, Kentucky is quite a culture change, quite a culture shock. So I get the guy wanting to go. I mean, you're completely across the country, and then Juzang obviously led them to a Final Four, and people are use that situation to be like, Coach Cal fumbled the bag here. Like, what did you want him to play over Tyrese Maxey that year? Did you want him to play over Emmanuel Quickly?
Right. Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, there were guys ahead of him that were better than him. So it's kind of
right. Yeah, and some guys are just better suited for other situations. Like it's not just like a guy can average 15 anywhere. Like
right.
sometimes you got to be in the right spot in the right system for that to happen. So like I don't think it's not like Cal's fault that a guy didn't fit the system and like wasn't playing.
Right. Yeah. And that's, again, there's such a large portion of every fan base of any sport that is just so out of touch with reality where people want to place the blame on one person's shoulders 24/7. This year it's all Coach Cal and it's all Severe Wheeler. Nobody else is at fault for anything. It's just those two guys are the reason why we're struggling. Fire Cal. Cal needs to go. Dude, after we lost to South Carolina, we walked in the number 5 team in the country and beat them at home. Nobody was singing Cal's praises like, oh, wow, he did a good job of turning this team around and getting them ready for this game. Nobody said anything about it. Like, whenever someone's doing well, whenever Coach Cal's done a great job coaching this team this year after we started off really disappointing and played bad, we've turned the season around. That is a testament to coaching. But instead of acknowledging that, they're like, oh, well, we shouldn't have been that bad to begin with. All right. You can't win with some people. But, hey, how's your Maryland Terrapins doing this year? I know they're ranked right now, aren't they?
We're not. We were at one point because at this point, I have to like keep reminding myself that we were supposed to be like really bad. Like this was supposed to be a rebuilding year. It's Kevin Willard's first season. We weren't like super deep, but we've been like surprisingly competitive. We are really bad on the road. Like I think our only true road win was against Louisville. And so like that's kind of all I need to say right there. But we've been really good at home. I think we're undefeated in the Big Ten at home. We saw them beat Indiana. We're on like a nice little 3 or 4 game winning streak. I think most bracketologists have us as like a 10 right now. Like I'll take that. We were supposed to be an NIT team this year, so I'll take it. It's funny though, because like, so I mean, you saw like I posted the video after we beat Indiana, basically being like, guys, Indiana's not that good. Like I've been saying this like the entire year, and all these people that come in my comments and they're like, I know a Maryland fan isn't talking. It's like, what do you mean? Like we're supposed to be awful, and we're like tied with you guys in conference
just
play.
beat you.
Like you guys were supposed to be like runaway favorite for the Big Ten, Final Four contender, and you're not even that good. It's like, let me enjoy the things that like are going well for me.
Yeah. Well, you're not allowed to have fun on the internet.
I know.
Dude.
Like,
you can't enjoy your team.
Imagine being a fan of a team. I know. Never do that.
It's like when Tennessee fans will get on my case for being happy. Oh, you're happy that you beat so and so. I was like, dude, can I just be a fan of my team? Like, is that cool with y'all? They're like, we own you in football. Okay. Am I supposed to not root for my team because Tennessee owns us? Like, what am I supposed to say?
Right. Like people get mad at me for being excited that my team that was supposed to be really bad is like actually okay. Like, I'm not even like I should be allowed to be happy about that. I think.
Well, after we walked into Tennessee and beat them, my comments were just, "Oh, y'all lost to South Carolina. Well, we're still better than you." I'm like, dude, I never even insulted y'all. Like I said, you're a good team, and we got a good win against a good team, and y'all are so insecure that you're coming in here being like, "Oh, what?" But like, can I just be excited that my team that just lost to the worst team in the SEC beat a top 5 team? Is that okay with y'all?
Yeah.
But that's just the funny part about the internet, dude. You can't post anything without people having something negative to say about it.
Or just like making things up that you didn't even say.
Yeah,
you know?
literally. That happens to me all the time. I had one dude the other day that was like, I remember you said fire Cal. What do you think now? I'm like, bro, those words have never exited my mouth. I have been one of the more pro Cal people in the fan base for years. Like and like everyone in the comments or everyone because it was during a live, everyone in the chat was like, bro, he's kind of been meat riding Cal all year. What are you talking about? Like, so I'm like, you just made that up. Like that actually never happened. Like, what are you even talking about? So that's the internet for you.
But overall, I'm pretty happy with how Maryland has been this year. And I think like with the games that we have left on our schedule, I feel pretty good about making the tournament at this point. Because we play Northwestern at home, who like they've been good, but I just don't think that's a team that can come into our house and beat us. We get to play Minnesota, we get to play Nebraska. So there's a bunch of winnable games left that I think we can have like a losing record at this point and still finish 500 in conference play. And I think 500 in the Big Ten would pretty much do it for us. So
yeah. I don't think we even touched on Kentucky's tournament chances because we're kind of like we're on the bubble right now. We're like some say last 4 in, some say first 4 out.
Yeah.
We have 5 quad 1 games left. We're currently 1-7 in quad 1 games. So it's like we're probably gonna have to beat Arkansas twice. We're gonna have to beat Florida on the road.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have to beat Tennessee at our place. Like we got some. Like, do you think Kentucky makes the tournament comfortably, or do you think we're still like eking it out?
Yeah, so I was looking at the schedule earlier, and it looks like most of like the best teams that you guys play those are home games for you. So that's that's a good sign. Obviously, like I think Tennessee will probably still be a top 10 team when you guys play them. You guys have to, I think you play Florida twice, so you have to go into the swamp. That's probably not going to be super fun, but
no,
should beat
Tennessee
them at home.
Proved that.
You should beat them at home. I think like the one thing that I would be nervous about would be like Arkansas figuring it out and like starting to get hot as we approach tournament time. Because I know you play them at least once, and if you play them twice, then we
play them twice.
Yeah, so that could throw a wrench in things, but I still think and if Kentucky's on the bubble, like let's just be realistic here. Like if this was Seton Hall, if we're talking about Seton Hall right now, like they're not getting into the tournament, right?
Yeah.
But like I think Kentucky's a program that you give them the benefit of the doubt when it's like we're picking between them and like somebody else. So.
I see some people putting Duke as a 5 seed. If Duke's a 5 seed, we're a 4 seed. Like there's no way, dude.
Honestly. Yeah.
I think it was Lunardi had Duke as a 5 seed. I'm like, are you actually serious right now?
Yeah,
like,
it just doesn't make any sense. Like I was seeing people putting like Wisconsin as an 8 seed, and it's like there is nothing about this Wisconsin team that like they're a borderline tournament team. Like they should not be an 8 seed.
Yeah, so I think it's our name might get us in alone, but I remember in 2013, the year after we won the national championship, we finished the season with some big wins, and we didn't make the tournament. So I don't know, man. I don't know. But would you say
even without the regular season games, like you still have SEC tournament, so like those wins kind of get magnified. You know?
Yeah. Okay. So we're 1-7 in quad 1 games. We have 5 left. Say we win 2 of the 5 that we have left, and we are 3-9 in quad 1 games. Is that a tournament resume?
Probably not. Honestly,
that's my concern. That's why I'm sketched out, because it's like we are gonna have to win 4 of the next, or at least 3 of the 5 to even consider it. That's my concern. And then even then, if we only win 3 of those 5 quad 1 games, we have to at least get to the SEC championship or something.
Yeah. What are the quad 1 games that you have left? I mean, it's Tennessee, Auburn,
Arkansas twice, Auburn, Tennessee, Florida on the road.
Okay. Gotcha.
Traveling on the road to a top 75 team, I believe, is quad 1.
Yeah, you're right.
So that's the 5 we got left.
Gotcha. I mean, I don't think I will say I don't think Auburn is like that good. I don't know if that's a
I
hot
don't think
take.
so either.
I just don't think they're that good. Like people, it's just to me it's just a lesser version of like last year's Auburn team that also like wasn't that good.
Yeah.
I mean, when they were good. I mean, they peaked probably too early, as I think
Jabari
for
Smith
all
and
of them.
Walker Kessler carried them
Yeah,
last year.
but now it's like you have the same backcourt that can't shoot, and you
Yep.
have a lesser front court. So like,
Mhm.
what does that make you?
Yeah,
You know?
Auburn does not impress me in the slightest. I had people mad at me for ranking. I did a slideshow where I was ranking them. I had them as like 6th in the SEC, and people were like, "What? Auburn is better than so and so." Auburn, and then no, they're not. They're not.
Yeah.
They're really not.
That's not even disrespectful. Like that's what they were in the preseason. Was
Yeah.
was 6th in the
Yeah.
SEC.
Well,
So.
and they haven't won anything crazy. They got blown out at home by A&M the other day. Like they're not that good. Like I do not trust that backcourt. And they got like what? Wendell Green is their point guard, and then the Johnson dude who's
Cade Johnson.
and then Zep Jasper who isn't good. So it's like I don't know, man. And Janai Broom is cool. I like Janai Broom.
Mhm.
He's dope. Dylan Cardwell is a decent backup center, but overall Auburn.
But I think that should be a win for you guys at home. That's the only place I was going with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Went off on a tangent about him.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tennessee is going to be tough. I mean, regardless, like it's hard to beat a team like that twice in a season.
Yeah.
So that's going to be rough. If we don't won the Kansas game, I'd be way more confident right now because that
was a big opportunity. But even as it stands, I still like. I'm not really into the like bracketology stuff, but I'd still give you like over a 50% chance of making the tournament at this point.
So. I hope so, because if we don't make the tournament, dude, our fan base is gonna lose it. It's gonna be really ugly if we miss.
Do you think Cal gets pushed out if you miss the tournament?
I don't see how you can push him out with that recruiting class coming in next year. I think you at least just wait one more year to see what they can do next year. I don't think you give up because if we push him out, he goes somewhere else. He's bringing all those recruits with him. What if he wins it all next year somewhere else with the recruits that were supposed to be here? I would lose my mind, bro. So I think at the very least, you give him one more year. If he super underachieves with that recruiting class next year, that's when it's time to make the step to take, be like, all right, it's time.
Sure.
But anyway, I added like 4 topics to the itinerary in the middle of the podcast. So this went a little longer than intended, but I just had things pop up that I definitely wanted to touch on because you're just so knowledgeable about college basketball as a whole, man. It's always a joy, talking hoops with you because I don't know many people that are just like that aren't on ESPN who know as much about the landscape as a whole as you do. And like we said, if you guys go back and listen to that first pod we did in the preseason, you predicted so many things that were correct. You predicted Keontae George going off. You predicted, all Baylor and Houston being some of the better teams in the country. Like, you know what you're talking about, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll actually have to go back and listen too because I mean, I get a lot of credit I think from you for the things that I'm right about, but there's definitely been a good amount of things that I've been wrong about too. So.
Well, I had Kentucky top 3 in the preseason, so I think we both had North Carolina number 1, so that didn't go well. But
no, not really. But they're
playing
better. They haven't been bad, but they definitely haven't been number 1. Like, I don't know if I'll eat that. I don't
know if I've ever seen a team go from number 1 to unranked as fast as they did. That was wild. They went from number 1 to unranked in like what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
I mean, they lost like they started out 5-4.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. Hey, it is what it is. I think UNC could have a similar season to last year. They're literally the same exact roster, except they just replaced Brady Manick with Pete Nance. So it'd be interesting.
Which to me is a downgrade for what they are.
It's a downgrade, but then you also get a more experienced Caleb Love and RJ Davis. And I'm probably one of the biggest Armando Bacot fans because he comes into my lives all the time and like comments on my videos. And he sent me a TikTok the other day. Like he just randomly just sent, he's like, I don't know. Armando Bacot's cool. He's super cool. He like randomly just DM'd me a TikTok the other day. I was like, is this one of the best players in the country just like sending me a TikTok like we're close friends or something? Like, I don't know. Just so I rock with Armando Bacot's the reason. I've always hated UNC. There are rivals. There are, they're one of the blue bloods. We're not supposed to like him, but he's got me pulling for him, which is weird.
That's cool though. Yeah.
But anyway, I think another like we had a preseason podcast where we talked about things at the beginning of the year. Now we've got like kind of a mid-season episode, and I think when the season's over, I definitely want to have you back on so we can kind of talk about the way everything went and kind of just do a postseason review, maybe look forward to next year a little bit, because it's always a great conversation having you on here. So appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. It's always a lot of fun coming on, chopping it up. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun.
Hell yeah. Well, BBN, if you guys are watching this, be sure to hit up Gym Range Pod on Twitter, on TikTok, of course. And how's your podcast going? You been doing the podcast lately or no?
Yeah, we have. We're recording a new episode tomorrow. We did like kind of once a week. Now we're slowing down into like kind of every other week territory. But looking to start like picking that back up again. It's just tough because like that was kind of like what we started with, but then everything around that is what has been the most successful. Right. So trying to get back to our roots a little bit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people don't understand. It's harder than it looks to like keep a podcast up and to stay consistent with the episodes. I mean, it's, a lot more goes into it than people think. So I definitely feel you on that one. But yeah, so you guys check out the Gym Range podcast. Hit them up on TikTok and Twitter and everything. Once again, appreciate having you on, and go Big Blue.